Om Shri Mahagणपतये Namaha. Om Shri Mahasaraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Atha Shriman Narayaneeyam Dashaka 34 Shri Ramacharita Varnanam, the story of Shri Rama. गीर्वाणैरर्त्यमानो दशमुखनिधनं कोसले शृङ्गे पुत्र्यामिष्टिमिष्ट्वा ददुषि दशरथक्ष्माभृते पायसाग्र्यं तद्भुक्त्या तत्पुरन्द्रीष्वपि तिसृषु समं जातगर्भासु जातो रामस्त्वं लक्ष्मणेन स्वयमथ भरतेनापि शत्रुघ्ननाम्ना. The Bhagavata Purana mentions that Vishnu, the Supreme Brahman, at the request of the gods, was born as Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrughna. The Valmiki Ramayanam in the Balakanda says that all the gods, Gandharvas, Siddhas and the great sages together went to God Brahma and told him, "O God, the Rakshasa Ravana, getting a boon from you, is tormenting all of us and we are unable to control him. Please devise some plan to kill him." When requested thus by the Devas, Brahma replied, "I have thought of the means to kill that evil Asura. Ravana had asked for invincibility from the Gandharvas, Yakshas, Devas and demons, and I had granted him that boon. Because of his contempt for human beings, he did not seek invincibility from the mortals. Therefore, only a human being can kill him, not anybody else." Hearing this revelation of Brahma, the gods became very happy. At that time, God Vishnu arrived there and all the gods prayed to him. They said, "O God Vishnu, we are engaging you for the welfare of the worlds. There is a king Dasharatha ruling in Ayodhya. He is very virtuous and liberal. He has 3 queens. O God, assuming 4 forms, you become the sons of Dasharatha. There, as a human being, you kill Ravanasura, who is a great terror to all of us. O God, you are the only refuge to us. Please help us." Thus praised by the gods, God Vishnu told them, "Have no fear. For your welfare, I will kill that demon Ravana and live in the world for 11,000 years to protect the earth." In the meantime, sages like Rishishringa performed a Putra Kameshti Yajna seeking the birth of a son to King Dasharatha at Ayodhya. Through the sacrifice, they obtained a divine payasam, and the queens of Dasharatha partook it, and all of them conceived simultaneously. Rama was born to Queen Kausalya, the chief queen of King Dasharatha. Bharata was born to Queen Kaikeyi, and Lakshmana and Shatrughna were born to Queen Sumitra. Now, coming to the verse, Atha tvam girvanaihi, then you, God Vishnu, by the Devas, Dashamukha nidhanam artyamanaha, prayed to for the slaying of the 10-faced Ravana. Kosaleshu Rishashringe, in the Kosala country by the sage Rishashringa. Putriyam ishtim ishtva, by performing the Putra Kameshti Yajna for the birth of a son to King Dasharatha. Dasharatha Shmabrite to King Dasharatha. Payasagryam Dadushi, when the divine payasam was given. Tad Bhuktya, by partaking that. Tisrishu Purandrishwapi Samam Jata Garbhasu, when the three queens of King Dasharatha conceived at the same time. Swayam Ramaha Bharatena Lakshmanena Shatrugna Namna cha Jataha. You were born as Rama along with Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrugna. Kodandi Kaushikasya Kratuvaramavitum Lakshmanenanu Yato Bhustata Vacha Munikatita Manudvandva Shantadvakedaha Nrinam Tranaya Banair Munivachana Balat Tatakam Patayitva Labdvasmadastrajalam Munivanamagamo Deva Siddhashamakyam. This Dashaka is composed in the Sragdara meter containing 21 syllables in each of the 4 quarters. The Valmiki Ramayanam narrates that sage Vishwamitra once came to the palace of King Dasharatha and asked him to send his son Rama along with him to the forest to protect his sacrifices from the demons. King Dasharatha was very sad to part with his son and send him to a formidable forest. The sage Vasishta impressed upon the king that he should not have any hesitation in sending Rama with the great sage. Dasharatha then sent his sons Rama and Lakshmana with sage Vishwamitra. Rama set out for the forest with a bow in his hand. The great sage taught the mantras Bala and Atibala to the princes Rama and Lakshmana. Because of this, they did not experience any difficulty during their sojourn in the forest. For the welfare of humanity, Rama, urged by sage Vishwamitra, killed the terrible Rakshasi Tataka by piercing her with an arrow. Rama secured many divine astras from sage Vishwamitra, who was very much pleased with the killing of Rakshasi Tataka. Along with the sage Vishwamitra, Rama and Lakshmana reached the Siddhashrama, the hermitage of Vamana Bhagavan. Now, coming to the verse, Deva, O effulgent God, Tata Vacha, by the words of your father, Kodandi, with a bow in your hand, Lakshmanena Anuyataha, followed by Lakshmana, Kaushikasya Kratuvaram Avitum, to protect the great sacrifice of Vishwamitra, Yataha Abuhu, you went, Muni Katita Manudvanda Shanta Advakedaha, whose tedium of travel was quietened by the 2 mantras Bala and Atibala taught by the sage. Nrinam Tranaya, for the protection of people. Muni Vachana Balat, by the strength of the sage's words. Banaihi Tatakam Patayitva, killing Rakshasi Tataka by arrows. Asmat Astrajalam Labdva, getting a group of astras from the sage. Siddhashramakyam Munivanam Agamaha, you reached the hermitage known as Siddhashrama. मारीचं द्रावयित्वा मखशिरसि शरैरन्यरक्षांसि निघ्नन् कल्यां कुर्वन्नहल्यां पतिपदरजसा प्राप्य वैदेहगेहम् बिन्दानश्चान्द्रचूडं धनुरवनिसुतामिन्दिरामेव लब्ध्वा राज्यं प्रातिष्ठतास्त्वं त्रिभिरपि च समं भ्रातृवीरैः सदारैः. The Valmiki Ramayanam describes that at the beginning of the sacrifice of sage Vishwamitra, the demons Maricha, Subahu and other Rakshasas polluted his sacrificial ground and troubled him very much. Prince Rama drove away the Rakshasa Maricha with his great Manavastra and killed many Rakshasas. In the course of time, sage Vishwamitra took Rama and Lakshmana to Mithila, the capital city of King Janaka. On the way, they saw a deserted hermitage where sage Gautama and his wife Ahalya used to live. It is said that sage Gautama once discovered that God Indra, disguised as Gautama Rishi, arrived in the hermitage during his absence, and Ahalya too got attracted by Indra. He became very angry and cursed both Indra and Ahalya. He cursed Ahalya and said, "O Ahalya, you will live here for many thousands of years without food or drink, living on air alone. You will be absolved of your sin when Rama, the son of Dasharatha, visits this hermitage. After that, you will be united with me." After pronouncing the curse, sage Gautama left the hermitage and went to Himalayas to perform austerities. At last, when Rama entered the hermitage of Gautama, he saw the austere Ahalya shining brilliantly. After the liberation of Ahalya by Sri Rama, Vishwamitra and others proceed towards Mithila. King Janaka eagerly came forward and welcomed sage Vishwamitra. When the sacrifice of King Janaka was complete, sage Vishwamitra requested the king to show his Shivadhanusha to Rama. King Janaka had declared that a person who strung the great bow shall marry his daughter Sita. King Janaka ordered the bow to be brought before them, and all the people in King Janaka's assembly looked at Rama in wonder when he strung the heavy Shivadhanusha with great ease. Immediately, King Janaka sent his messengers to King Dasharatha and conveyed the message of Rama's unique achievement. On hearing the message, Dasharatha set out with his retinue to Mithila. Janaka and Dasharatha celebrated the marriage of their daughters and sons with great grandeur. Rama married Sita, Lakshmana married Urmila, Bharata married Mandavi, and Shatrughna married Shrutakirti. After the marriage ceremony, Rama started on his return journey to his kingdom. Now, coming to the verse, Tvam, you, God Vishnu as Rama, Makashirasi at the beginning of the sacrifice, Sharaihi Maricham Dravayitva, driving away Maricha with arrows, Anya Rakshansi Nignan, killing other Rakshasas, Pati on the way, Padarajasa Ahalyam Kalyam Kurvan, purifying Ahalya with the dust of your foot. Vaideha Geham Prapya, reaching the home of the Videha king Janaka. Chandra Chudam Danuhu Bindanaha, breaking the bow of Shiva, who has the crescent of moon on his head. Indiram Eva Avani Sutam Labdva, getting Sita, the daughter of the earth, who was goddess Lakshmi herself. Sadaraihi Tribihi Api Bhratriviraihi Samam, along with the three brothers who had their wives with them. Rajyam Pratishtataha, you returned back to your kingdom, Ayodhya. Arundane Rushande Bhrigukulatillake Sankramayasvatejo Yate Yatosya Yodhyam Sukamiha Nivasan Kantaya Kantamurte Shatrughne Naikadato Gatavati Bharate Matulasyadhivasam Tatarabdo Bhishekastava Kila Vihatak Kekayadhisha Putriya. The Valmiki Ramayanam describes that when King Dasharatha was returning to Ayodhya with his newly married sons, many inauspicious omens occurred on their way before the arrival of the sage Parashurama. Sage Parashurama appeared before them as though he was angry with Rama for breaking the Shiva Dhanusha, the bow of his preceptor Shiva at Mithila. Parashurama accepted the argya offered to him by Vasishta and other sages and then challenged Rama to string the Vishnu Dhanusha given to him by his father Jamadagni. The powerful Rama took the bow and arrow from Parashurama and strung it with great ease. Parashurama became powerless and was wonderstruck at Rama's prowess. Rama did not want to strike at Parashurama as he was a sacred Brahmana, and he asked Parashurama himself whether he should obstruct the free movement of Parashurama or Parashurama's entry to heavens by the discharge of his arrow. As Parashurama did not want his movement to be hampered, Rama discharged the arrow, which became a permanent barrier for Parashurama's passage to the heavens. Then the sage Parashurama circumambulated Rama and proceeded towards the Mahendra mountain. The victorious Rama returned to Ayodhya and lived happily in the company of his beloved Sita. As days passed by, King Dasharatha, noticing that he was advancing in age, wanted to crown Rama as the Yuvaraja and entrust him with the responsibilities of the kingdom. The happy news regarding the proposed coronation of Rama delighted all the citizens as Rama was very dear to them. King Dasharatha asked Vasishta, Vamadeva and other holy sages to make grand preparations for Rama's coronation. Manthara, a woman companion and confidential servant of Kaikeyi, poisoned Kaikeyi's mind and altered her love for Rama. At the time of his marriage with Kaikeyi, Kaikeyi's father had extracted a promise from King Dasharatha that the child born to Kaikeyi should become the future ruler of Ayodhya. Reminding King Dasharatha of that promise, Kaikeyi asked Dasharatha to banish Rama to the forest and crown her son Bharata. Kaikeyi also reminded that King Dasharatha should fulfill the 2 boons which he promised to her during the Devasura Sangrama. By means of one of these boons, Kaikeyi wanted to exile Rama to a forest for 14 years, and through the other, she wished that her son Bharata may be made the crown prince. Now, coming to the verse, He Kantamurte, O you God, having a pleasing form, Bhrigukula Tilake Rushande Arundane. When, blinded by anger, Parashurama, the foremost person in the family of the Bhrigus, Swatejaha Sankramayya Yate, he went away after transferring his powers to you. Ayodhyam Yataha Asi, you reached Ayodhya. Iha Kantaya, here in Ayodhya, with your beloved Sita, Sukham Nivasan, living happily. Ato ekada Bharate Shatrugnena Matulasya Adivasam Gatavati. Then, once when Bharata, along with Shatrughna, had gone to the home of his uncle, Tata Rabdaha, started by father Dasharatha, Tava Abhishekaha, your coronation, Kekayadisha Putrya Vihataha Kila. It is said that it was resisted by the daughter of the Kekaya king, Kaikeyi. Tatoktya yatu kamo vanamanujabadu sanyutaschapadharaha Pauranarudhya marge guhanilayagatastvam jatachiradhari Navasantirya gangam adhipadavipунastambaradvajamaran Natva tadvakya heto ratisukamavasaschitrakute girindre. The Valmiki Ramayanam states that when Queen Kaikeyi spoke about the 2 boons granted to her by King Dasharatha and banished Rama to a forest, Rama remained calm and undisturbed. He was ready to go to the forest so that the promise by King Dasharatha to the queen could be fulfilled. The people of Ayodhya were wonderstruck to see the mental poise of Prince Rama on that occasion. Navanam gantukamasya tyajatascha vasundaram sarvalokatigasyeva lakshate chitta vikriya. Valmiki Ramayanam, Ayodhya Kandam, 19th Adhyaya, 33rd verse. Which means no change could be seen in the mind of Rama, who wanted to go to the forest and who relinquished a rich kingdom. He was like a yogi who excelled all common people. On the eve of his departure to the forest, Rama took leave of his mother Kausalya and secured her blessings. Rama tried to dissuade Sita from coming with him to the forest, but Sita was very firm in accompanying him, and Rama had to yield to her wishes. Lakshmana was also determined to go with Rama and Sita. Rama, at the time of his departure, along with Sita and Lakshmana, went to the palace of King Dasharatha to take leave of him. King Dasharatha was very much grieved at the parting. Rama then ordered his servants to bring him barks of trees to wear during his stay in the forest. Queen Kaikeyi herself brought the desired dress for Rama. Rama and Lakshmana took off their princely robes and put on the bark garments. Princess Sita did not know how to wear a bark garment, and Rama helped her and himself put it on her silken dress. Chiram babanda Sitaya Kausheyasyopari Swayam. Valmiki Ramayanam, Ayodhya Kandam, 37th Adhyaya, 14th verse. Under the command of King Dasharatha, Sumantra got a chariot to take Rama and others to the forest. King Dasharatha called the officer in charge of his treasury and ordered that many rich robes and valuable ornaments be given to Sita for her use during the long period of their forest stay. Sita adorned herself with those ornaments and shone brilliantly. The citizens, out of their love for Rama, followed the chariot carrying Rama and others for a very long time, and Rama had to send them back to the city with great difficulty. Traveling in the chariot, Rama crossed the Kosala country and reached the vicinity of the holy Ganga. He alighted from the chariot under an ingudi tree and went forward to meet Guha, the chief of the Nishadas, who had come to meet him. Guha closely embraced Rama and welcomed him with great esteem. Worshipping the evening twilight and taking water alone for food, Rama lay down on the ground to repose for the night. Next day, Rama sent back Sumantra to Ayodhya. Rama and Lakshmana entangled their locks of hair into a thick mass with the milk of a banyan tree procured by Guha. Then the three of them, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana, got into a boat. On reaching the middle of the stream, Sita offered prayer to Mother Ganga. After crossing the river, all the three halted for the night at the foot of a tree. Rama then set out on his journey for the Dandaka forest with Sita and Lakshmana. At last, they reached the hermitage of sage Bharadwaja. The sage recommended that mountain Chitrakuta is the fittest place for them to live. Early next morning, Rama and others departed for Chitrakuta, where Rama lived happily in the company of Sita. Now coming to the verse, Tatoktya, by the words of Father Dasharatha. Chapadaraha, holding the bow in hand. Anuja Vadu Sanyutaha, accompanied by your younger brother Lakshmana and wife Sita. Vanam Yatu Kamaha Tvam, you Bhagavan Vishnu as Rama, desiring to go to the forest. Marge Pauran Arudhya, on the way stopping the citizens who had come along with you. Guha Nilaya Gataha, going to the abode of Guha. Jata Chira Dhari, wearing matted locks and barks of trees. Nava Gangam Santirya Punaha, again crossing the river Ganges by a boat. Adi Padavi Arat, on the way prostrating to sage Bharadwaja, who was living nearby. Tam Bharadwajam Natva, Tadvakya Hetoho Chitrakute Girindre Atisukam Avasaha, lived very happily on the great mountain Chitrakuta, following his words. Shrutva putrarthikinnam kalu bharatamuka swargayatam swatatam tapto datvambutasmai nidadita bharate padukam medinim cha atrim natva tagatva vanamati vipulam dandakam chandakayam hatva daityam viradam sugatimakalayascharubho sharabangim. According to the Valmiki Ramayanam, Bharata went in search of Rama, followed by his retinue. Reaching Rama's abode in the forest, Bharata requested Rama to return to Ayodhya and rule the kingdom. In spite of the repeated requests of Bharata, Rama did not swerve from the path of his dharma. Ultimately, Bharata requested Rama to give his padukas and took a vow that those padukas shall rule Ayodhya till Rama returned. Bharata made the padukas of Rama as the presiding deity of the kingdom of Ayodhya. He decided to stay in Nandigrama and perform his royal duties. While Rama led an austere life in the forest for 14 years, Bharata also led a pious life at Nandigrama. After the departure of Bharata, Rama was not happy to stay at Chitrakuta. The memory of the sad Bharata troubled him greatly. Rama also felt lonely, as rishis had also left Chitrakuta, being afraid of the Rakshasa Kara. Rama decided to seek some other abode in the Dandaka forest because he feared the coming of Bharata again. Rama, Sita and Lakshmana left Chitrakuta and proceeded to the hermitage of sage Atri and sought his advice regarding where they should establish themselves. Sage Atri received them with great affection. Atri's Patni, the holy Anasuya, blessed Sita and presented her beautiful clothes and auspicious cosmetics. After securing the blessings of sage Atri and Anasuya, Rama and others resumed their onward journey. They entered a thick forest abounding in wild animals. They proceeded cautiously, but all of a sudden the ferocious demon Virada rushed towards them. Virada gave a terrible roar, sprang forward and lifted Sita up. Rama and Lakshmana overpowered Virada. Demon Virada was originally a Gandharva Tumburu, and he requested Rama to kill him so that he could regain his original form. Rama and Lakshmana fulfilled his wish, and Virada immediately returned to the world of the Gandharvas. After this, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana visited the hermitage of sage Sharabanga. The sage was waiting to see Rama, and soon he kindled a fire and entered it. Rising from that heap of fire, Sharabanga shone bright and rose to the Brahmaloka, where he saw God Brahma. Brahmadeva was also delighted to see the sage Sharabanga. Now coming to the verse, Woe, O God! Bharata Mukat, from Bharata's mouth, Swatatam Putrarthikinnam Kalu Swargayatam Shrutva. Hearing that your father, grieving at the separation of his son, went to the heavens. Taptaha, pained. Tasmai Ambu Datva, giving him water of Tarpana. Bharate Padukam Medinim cha Nidadita. You gave to Bharata the Padukas and the kingdom. Ata Atrim Natva, then bowing to the sage Atri. Ati Vipulam Dandakam Vanam Gatva, going to the very vast Dandaka forest. Chandakayam, having a terrible form. Viradam Daityam Hatva, killing the Rakshasa Virada who had a terrible form. Sharabangim Sugatim Charu Akalayaha, you beautifully gave moksha to sage Sharabanga. Natvagastyam samasta sharanikara sapatra kritim tapasebhyaha pratyashraushi priyaishi tadanucha munina Vaishnave divya chape brahmastre chapi datte patipitru suhridam vichya bhuyo jatayum modad godatante pariramasi pura panchavatyam vadutya. The Valmiki Ramayanam describes that during their exile, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana lived peacefully in the hermitages of sages in the Dandakaranya. At the end of 10 years, Rama desired to meet sage Agastya who resided in the southern region. Agastya welcomed Rama, Sita and Lakshmana and presented Rama with a divine bow made by Vishwakarma for God Vishnu, an inexhaustible quiver and a sword. He instructed Rama to destroy the Rakshasas and advised Rama to spend the remaining period of his exile at Panchavati. On their way to Panchavati, Rama met Jatayu, a vulture with a huge body and great prowess. When Rama came to know that Jatayu was a close friend of his father Dasharatha, he honored him and requested Jatayu to take care of Sita during her stay in the forest. At Panchavati, Rama and others lived happily in the cottage built by Lakshmana, enjoying the bounties of nature and the pure waters of river Godavari. Now coming to the verse, Tapasebhyaha priyaishi, wanting to do good to the ascetics. Samasta ashara nikara sapatrakritim pratyashraushihi, you promise the slaying of the multitude of the Rakshasas to the sages. Tadanu Agastyam Natva, then bowing to sage Agastya. Munina Vaishnave Divya Chape Brahmastre Chapicha Datte. When the sage Agastya gave the divine Vaishnava bow and the Brahmastra to you. Bhuyaha Pati, again on the way. Pitru Suhridam Jatayum Vicha, seeing Jatayu, the friend of your father Dasharatha. Modat, with happiness. Goda Tatante Panchavatyam Vadutya Pura Pariramasi, you lived happily with Sita in Panchavati on the banks of the river Godavari. Praptayaha Shurpanakya Madana Chaladrite Rartanai Nissahatma Tam Saumitrau Visrija Prabalatamurusha Tena Nirluna Nasam Drishtvainam Rushtachittam Karamabhipatitam Dushanam Chatrimurdam Vyahinsirasharanapyayuta samadhikans Dachatoshma. When Rama, Sita and Lakshmana were having a happy time in the beautiful Panchavati, Shurpanaka Ravana's sister, chanced to see them and was smitten with love for Rama. Shurpanaka approached Rama, who was with Sita, and requested him to marry her. Rama directed Shurpanaka to Lakshmana, who again sent her back to Rama. Shurpanaka again approached Rama and, considering Sita to be the obstacle on her way, sprang on her. Lakshmana, getting very angry, cut off the nose of Rakshasi Shurpanaka. Shurpanaka ran away and apprised her brother Khara, living in Janasthana, about the happening. Shurpanaka returned with many Rakshasas headed by Khara and wanted to take revenge on Rama. Rama easily overpowered Khara and his followers. Dushana, Trishiras, and many Rakshasas were also killed by Rama. Akampana was one of the Rakshasas who survived the great battle at Panchavati, and he fled to Lanka and conveyed the news to Ravana. Now coming to the verse, Achatoshma, whose power can never be diminished. Madana Chaladritehe, Shurpanaka, who lost her mental balance because of passion. Praptayaha Shurpanakyaha Archanaihi Nissahatma. Losing your patience by the requests of Shurpanaka, who approached you. Tam Saumitro Visrijya, sending her to Sumitra's son Lakshmana. Prabala Tama Rusha Tena, by Lakshmana, who had great anger. Nirluna Nasam Enam Drishtva, seeing her with her nose cut off by Lakshmana. Rushta Chittam Abhipatitam Karam Dushanam Trimurdam Cha Ayuta Samadikan Asharan Api Tatshanat Vyahinsihi. You immediately killed the angry Kara, Dushana, Trimurda, and the other Rakshasas, who were more than 10,000 in number, who came to attack you. Sodarya Prokta Varta Vivasha Dashamuka Dishta Maricha Maya Sarangam Sarasachya Sprihitamanugata Pravadir Banagatam Tanmaya Kranda Niryapita Bavadanujam Ravanasta Maharshit Tenartopi Tomanta Kimapi Mudamadastuadvadopaya Labhat. When Shurpanaka was humiliated and her nose was cut off by Lakshmana, she rushed to Lanka and appeared before Ravana. She informed Ravana about the great powers of Rama and Lakshmana and described the remarkable beauty of Sita. Shurpanaka urged Ravana to capture Sita to counter the insult offered to her and the other Rakshasas. Ravana was impressed by Shurpanaka's words and he wanted to get the beautiful Sita. Deciding to capture Sita, Ravana rushed to Maricha's hermitage and conveyed his resolve to abduct Sita. Maricha advised Ravana to desist from such an act of sin, but Ravana did not follow his advice. Maricha then transformed himself into a wonderfully beautiful deer and wandered in the vicinity of Panchavati. When Sita spotted the exquisitely beautiful deer, she was fascinated by it and beseeched Rama to get it for her. The deer Maricha took Rama far away in the jungle till at last Rama aimed an arrow at it. When he fell, Maricha imitated Rama's voice and called out for Sita and Lakshmana. Getting alarmed on hearing Rama's voice, Sita sent Lakshmana to offer protection to Rama. Ravana, who was waiting for such an opportunity when Sita will be alone, disguised himself as an ascetic and carried away Sita in his chariot. Now, coming to the verse, Sodarya by the sister Shurpanaka. Ravana, when he heard his sister Shurpanaka, Prokta Varta Vivasha Dashamukha Adishta Maricha Maya Sarangam. By the news told by Shurpanaka, the 10-faced Ravana, who became overwhelmed with passion and ordered Maricha to assume the form of a beautiful deer. Sarasachya Sprihitam Anugataha. Rama, who followed the deer, desired by the lotus-eyed Sita. Banaghatam Pravadihi. You, Rama, killed Maricha with your arrows. Tan Maya Kranda Niryapita Bavadanujam Tam Ravanaha Aharshit. Sita, who sent away your younger brother Lakshmana for searching you, being deluded by the cry of Maricha, was carried away by Ravana. Tena tvam artaha api. Because of this, though you became distressed, tadvada upaya labhat antaha kimapi mudam adaha. You were also a little happy in the mind because of getting a very good reason to kill Ravana. Bhuyastanvim vichinvannahrita dashamukastvadvadum madvadenet tyuktva yate jatayau divamata suhrida pratano pretakaryam Grinnanam tam kabandam jaganitha shabarim prechya pampatate tvam samprapto vatasunum brishamudita mana pahi vatalayesha. Rama realized that Maricha had deceived them and he became anxious about Sita's safety at Panchavati. When Rama returned to their cottage accompanied by Lakshmana, he became alarmed on finding that Sita was missing. They made a desperate search for Sita, but she could not be seen anywhere. Rama was full of sorrow and he fainted. Regaining consciousness, Rama wept aloud and nothing could comfort him. Again searching for Sita everywhere, among mountains, forests and river banks, at last they met Jatayu. Jatayu informed them in a faint voice about Ravana carrying away Sita forcibly and his encounter with him. Rama was filled with compassion when he saw the supreme sacrifice of Jatayu and embraced him affectionately. Jatayu breathed his last in the presence of Rama, and Rama performed the last rites for the revered Jatayu. When Rama and Lakshmana proceeded further in their search for Sita, they came across Kabanda, a great monster. Kabanda informed them about the curse that he had incurred and that he could be freed from that only by Rama and Lakshmana. In accordance with Kabanda's wishes, Rama and Lakshmana consigned his body to fire. And from the fire, a heavenly being emerged. Before ascending the heavens, the divine person informed Rama and Lakshmana that they will surely regain Sita and advised that they should visit the beautiful banks of the Pampa river and seek the assistance of Sugriva residing in the Rishyamukha hill. As advised by Kabanda, Rama and Lakshmana moved forward in the forest in the direction of the river Pampa. In that charming region, they visited the hermitage of Shabari. Shabari was a great ascetic, and feeling her life fulfilled after her meeting with Rama, she entered fire and departed for her heavenly world. Thereafter, the Vanara chief Sugriva and his attendants chanced to see Rama and Lakshmana in their vicinity and were filled with apprehension. After being driven out of his kingdom by his elder brother Vali, Sugriva lived on the Rishyamukha mountain with Hanuman as his chief minister. Hanuman approached Rama and Lakshmana and informed them in detail about Sugriva and himself. Now, coming to the verse. Bhuyaha Tanvim Vichinvan. Then Rama, searching for the beautiful Sita, Dashamukaha Madvadena Twadvadum Ahrita. The 10-faced Ravana, striking me, carried away your wife, so saying, when Jatayu went to the heavens. Iti uktva Jatayau divam yate. Suhrudaha pretakaryam pratanoho. You perform the final rites for the friend Jatayu. Ata grinnanam tam kabandam jaganita. Then you killed the Rakshasa Kabanda who caught hold of you. Pampa tate Shabarim Prekshya. Seeing the ascetic Shabari on the banks of the Pampa river. Vatasunum sampraptaha brishamudita manaha. You became very happy. You, God Vishnu as Rama, became very happy when you came across Hanuman. Vatalayesha tvam pahi. O God of Guruvayur, please protect me.